And it's actually from the book of Esther in the Bible, of all places. It talks about Mordecai, who was a leader in that time.
A leader is also a light in the darkness.
I think differently, and now I believe in myself because I'm around him, and I think even more is possible.
Welcome to Leading Lubbock. Today's guest is someone I've admired for a while, not just because of her impressive titles, but because of the way she leads with humility, clarity, and conviction. Dr. Amy Thompson is the Chief Executive for Covenant Health's Lubbock service area and the former CEO of Covenant Children's Hospital. Before stepping into executive leadership, she trained and worked as a pediatrician, experience that still shapes the way she leads today. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to lead when you feel unprepared, how culture starts with vulnerability at the top, and how her faith and family have shaped her leadership over the years. She even shares the powerful story of raising her husband's younger brother and how that experience changed everything. This episode is packed with wisdom and real-life perspective, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Here's my conversation with Dr. Amy Thompson. Today I've got the pleasure of sitting in with Amy Thompson, and thank you so much, first off, for taking the time out of your schedule to come and be here with me today.
For sure.
Really appreciate you.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to talk leadership. Mm-hmm. I know you've been in various capacities of leadership before, and leading a family, being a part of just young kids growing up, and sports and all of personal life too. So excited to hear what you have to offer. And one of the things I'm really excited about, is getting a chance to hear a little bit of your journey. So thank you for taking the time to
Absolutely.
be here and
my pleasure.
Get to talk about it. So first off, I would love to know, what does being an effective leader look like to you? And then maybe how has that evolved over time?
Absolutely. An effective leader, we joke about this, but literally the answer to are you a good leader is if you turn around and people are following you. And I know sometimes we like to make it a lot more, complicated. And I'll talk about the things that go into making someone a great leader, in my opinion, and what I've seen, things I've done good and things I've done bad. But at the end of the day, the quality of your leadership is, are people actually coming with you? And that's the definition for me of a good leader, is that you're going to some destination, and that's always going to change, dependent on the type of leadership, that you're looking at. And are you taking people along with you to that destination? And that's the crux of leadership. And I'll talk about, I think, the things that I think lead you to be a good leader in that. And I always want to say the good leader part, because there are plenty of people who lead people to bad places. Mm-hmm. And so also, the quality of where you're taking someone is also a huge, component of that. But I always joke about it that we write 50,000 books and we write 50,000, things. And the answer is, are you going to a destination that you believe in, and are you taking people along with you?
Mm-hmm. So I have this visual of you're looking forward, but at the same time, you kind of, your head's on a swivel.
That's right.
Is that kind of how it feels, practically living
Absolutely.
that out?
And, I joke, my journey is, when I was young, I was a basketball player, and I was always elected captain, of my team. And I say this because I do think that sometimes, I look back and think I was not setting out, when you're, 12 years old, you're not thinking, I am going to go be the leader, of my basketball team.
You're not aspiring.
But you start to understand as you look back, what are the things that, that made that. I was a point guard, you're running the offense, and, you're leading the team. But I feel like I don't want to pass by, some of those leadership lessons I learned. Now I'm over the 4 Covenant hospitals in Lubbock, Texas. So it's this huge scope, of the things that I'm over. But what's funny is I don't know that all the lessons are all that different from even going back to my earliest days, of being captain of the basketball team, and the things that you learn. It's a different context, but it's the same stuff.
It's basic fundamentals.
It's basic fundamentals of what it means to be a good leader. And I say that because I've done it really well and I've done it really poorly. And so you learn in that, what are the characteristics that are helping make you a great leader.
Okay. So What do you think it was when you were, what age did you say?
I mean,
kind of like early on.
Early
I
on.
mean,
I started playing basketball when I was 5. And
okay.
I joked about it. I was always the girl in charge.
Right when you stepped on the court.
Yeah, when I stepped on the court.
So what do you think it was that naturally that was the posture and that's how people looked at you and that's what you stood up to? Or like, yeah.
I do think I think a point guard is the natural leader on the team because you're running the offense, you're calling what's happening on defense. But like when I talk about some of even those earliest lessons, man, you got to love your teammates. I loved all my teammates. And we all collectively had the same goal, even if it was just, not huge life consequences, but we want to win district or we want to do these things. And so we had a common goal. But when I look at stuff like some of the hallmarks, I think of good leadership are even things like humility. And so I'll tell you a lesson very early on that I learned in basketball. Like I didn't learn it, in these big corporations. Is I had a coach that when I was very young said, "Listen, if there's a turnover and you had touched the ball, when you were making the play, like it's on you." And so like if the post didn't catch it when you threw it, how are you going to make an adjustment? Yeah. To help them be successful next time, when you're doing this. And so what's interesting is even from a very early age, I learned very much, my rule is anytime we had a turnover or anything like that, even if it actually wasn't really my fault totally, I would look at that person and say, that's on me. That's me. And it's because you've got to learn how to take like responsibility for the things that you're trying to lead. But it's also true that you got to start with you. You've got to start with that understanding of if you're going to lead, how are you going to make adjustments to make everybody successful on your team?
So responsibility, that's like the main theme I heard of that, of like taking ownership of the things that you did and the responsibilities you had in that. So basketball court, easy to see that play out, right? Because physically who touched the ball as you're passing it. How does that translate over to the day-to-day now that you're running offices in Covenant?
I'll talk about when I'm a physician, I'm a pediatrician by training. And so what I wanted to be when I grew up was an academic pediatrician. So graduated, was a professor at the med school, and this is what I wanted, to do with my life. And the thing that's interesting, like when I look at my physician career, and I look at how I led there, where I was really comfortable leading is, I was a hospitalist, so I was seeing sick patients in the hospital, and I was leading other people who were doing the same thing. And so I was really comfortable in roles, and I would say basketball was that. I'm on the court, playing with the team. And I was really, really comfortable in leading. I call it from the work, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like I'm doing the work with you. And so when I look at my leadership, then there's a lot of, if you want them to follow you, you be excellent. You want to have you want to teach on your team that we're going to, value patients and we're going to listen to our patients. I knew how to lead by like that example, if that, doing the work with them. I think the hardest evolution of my leadership came when I became an administrator. And it was the first time that I actually stepped out of, I'm not actually going to be doing the work with you. I mean, I'm with you, but I'm not going to.
You're not doing that
the
work.
same work. And so I really feel like when I look at the time that I grew the most in my leadership, it was transitioning from that we're all going to do the same work and I'm going to be in this with you to now I'm in this new position. I first became the chief medical officer at the Children's Hospital, and that was just a huge step for me. But I would say even after that, I was still a practicing physician, so I was still able to do a lot of those things. I was kind of over, that liaising with the medical staff. But a year in, this way crazy turn of events, like I always say, I'm a believer, and so I think the Lord just has things for you that you're not preparing for yourself. I was asked, the boss that I was working for became sick almost overnight, and and I remember I called the gentleman who was in charge then that he reported to, and I said, "You've got to have a plan. Like, we got to make a plan. We got to make a plan for what we're going to do now that he's out." And a week later, they came back and said, "We've got a great plan, and it's that you're going to become the CEO." And I legitimately told them that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And I feel like that for me is probably the fast track of when leadership for me took on something completely new. I was still active clinically, but was leading, in a different way, and was over a lot of things that honestly I just didn't have a lot of experience in. And so that was a really interesting first few years for me in the CEOing. I was actually uninterested in the job. I thought it was the stupidest thing that they had ever concocted. And honestly, I had a huge knowledge gap. I mean, I had things that I needed to learn that I didn't know. And so that for me is when I had to really dig deep and come back to, okay, how am I going to lead this thing when I feel so uncomfortable with, kind of this jump and the way that this has happened. But I also feel like looking back, in my opinion, that's where I grew the most in learning that, because I'll give some examples of the kind of things that I've tried to carry forward. Okay, I thought it was stupid that they had asked me to do this job. And so therefore I did not care in meetings to be like, I don't understand what that means. Tell me what this means. Explain this to me. Because I think I was almost trying to prove a point. Like, this is so dumb.
This isn't my role.
This is my role. This is so stupid. And what's crazy is that's a great example of all of a sudden what started happening is I was in a board meeting and I said, I don't even understand what EBITDA stands for. Somebody's going to have to explain, what this means. And when I was leaving the board meeting, I had 3 board members who said, I didn't actually understand what EBITDA was. And I've just been sitting in this meeting too afraid to say, I didn't know what that means. And so I really feel like some of the most valuable lessons that I've learned in leadership, I actually learned because I wasn't ready for that role and because I did have a knowledge gap, and what it is that I had to do to make up that gap taught me some very, very valuable lessons about what it looks like.
Does that give you more confidence to step into new situations?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And I feel like when you're at the top of your organization and you are not afraid to ask questions and you are not afraid to be vulnerable, you're not afraid to say, hey, I'm so sorry, I don't know what that means. I need somebody to explain. What you get is you build a culture where people are going to ask questions and people are going to raise their hand when they don't know. And that seems like a really small thing, but creating that kind of a culture, I think the thing that you learn is so much of this stuff is learned in your organization from the top down. And so you've got to think about the way that you're modeling that for the people that you work with. And I just happened on that one because I really was actually stupid and did not know. I legitimately did not know the answer to the question, what does EBITDA mean? And they had asked me to be the CEO. And so I think that gives you a lot of rope to feel like you can ask a lot of questions and feel like you can learn.
There's a lot of freedom in that.
A lot of freedom.
I hope that people are listening and okay, there are situations in my life and maybe I can be the dumb one in the room and say, no, not understanding that. Don't know. A lot of fear in that too, I think, from what are people going to think of me, and
That's right.
I don't look like I know what I'm doing, so am I going to lose credibility and trust?
That's right.
So breaking through those barriers, I'm sure not simple, but when you're forced to, you're taught it's okay.
That's exactly.
That.
And I was going to say, I feel like I was just so unprepared that so many of the lessons that I try to, implement now was learned in some of that ground of just not knowing, exactly what I was doing.
Man, so good. You also were talking about this movement into the administrator role versus being side by side and doing the same work as other people. And I had this image. One, I had a conversation with Bob Goff before where we were talking about sameness does not equal oneness. And that was kind of an eye-opener to me. And it was in a different context and where we were talking about I just feel so different than the people I'm working with. Well, that sameness does not have to equal oneness. You can still be different and one.
That's right.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking too, like, just because you're not in the same role does not mean that you're not still one. And then you can take that and even turn it into the body of Christ, right? And you were like, we're not all doing the same thing, but we can all be one and one objective goal as
we
a
have
group.
My favorite thing about working at Covenant, and I mean, like I said, it just happened, to me, and I've just been blessed with that. But I have come to love, when I was a physician full-time, there and working for Texas Tech, I don't know that I understood their mission, vision, and values. I mean, because they weren't my direct employer. And so one of the big pivotal things that happened for me in terms of like what drives us and what causes us all to be one and where we're going is about a year in, in fact, it was right when I was becoming the CEO. So I talked about I'd been the CMO for a year. This terrible thing had happened with my boss. And I got invited on a pilgrimage with this group of sisters, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange, who are the sisters that run the hospital.
Wow.
And I say this because I am not Catholic. I was not raised in this faith tradition, but I ended up on this pilgrimage with the sisters. And I have to tell you, it's one of the most profound just like turning points for me, understanding these women. What we did is we traveled to France. We went to where they started their ministry. We learned in the 1600s how they went from being cloistered to really wanting to serve the community, and how they determined the needs of the community and what pushed them. And I have to say that today, I'm 11 years in from starting this journey. I'm now in a bigger role than just at the Children's Hospital. And like the thing that has unified, and that thing you were talking about, we can all do different things, but we're unified around this one thing, for us is the mission, vision, and values. And the Sisters of St. Joseph are the ones who have imprinted that on me. And so like examples of that would be, we are here to serve all. And then we have a comma, especially the poor and vulnerable. And so like those are mission statements for us that, irrespective of where we are and what job we're doing, like we're all unified around this common place that we're going. And for us, it is set by the sisters who would tell you that they are emulating Christ, in where it is that we're trying to go. And I can't tell you how many times that's the common ground that we find. Like the common ground that we find is, okay, here's our 5 values, and justice is one of those values. And so like even having like handles to talk about problems where we can all say, surely we all agree in the 5 values of Covenant and justice. And so how can we solve this problem together, even if we do different things? Goodness. Because we're all going to this same destination of wanting to make that work. And so I think that, and I think it's true in churches. I think it's true in your family. I mean, I think it's true on your basketball team. Yeah. It doesn't matter where that destination is, but like having a destination that all of you believe in getting to, that has to create the common ground. Yeah. That's got to create the thing that you're rallying around, even if your jobs are different. Right.
Man, that's so good. So I'm such a visual person. As we talk, you'll find that out. No. But I just like, as you talk, I think of these analogies, and I kind of think of a string that started at the top that somebody's holding on to, and that string just like continues all the way to the ground. And what you did in that moment was you're further down in the string, but you traveled up the string to see like where did that come from? And then how did that string continue down to where you are? And as long as everybody's holding the string, even if it gets pulled in different directions, like it's still the same string and the same thread that started. And if you hold on to that, goodness, the power of the organization or whatever it is that you're moving towards, man,
I agree.
Because you have held on to that. And the only way to do that is by going back to the source. It is. And so I think for you, that journey to the pilgrimage, wow, what a experience.
I got to take my husband with me, and so he got to go on the pilgrimage as well. And the reason I love that is because Dusty will tell you he believes in the values of Covenant. And it's because, he was at the pilgrimage and got to learn the same things. I still get the privilege of meeting with the sisters once a month. They come in, they still serve on our board of directors. And, man, they're our guiding, post. And we all talk about how just their ability to come in and speak to where it is that we're going. And, and even just random questions. I was at a dinner one night at their house. They have a little house here when they come in for board meeting. And I was lamenting over a service line that we have in mental and behavioral health that I was losing just so much money, on. And I think I was kind of looking for some sympathy and, I don't know what I was wanting them to say, but we're at dinner. Yeah, exactly. And I'm kind of belly aching, about what's going on. And this is where those values and those places that you're going can be so unifying. And one of the sisters looked at me and said, well, Amy, do you think Jesus was for mental and emotional health? Well, yes, ma'am. I sure do. Do you think Jesus, and just starts asking me all these questions and then says, so if our mission, vision, and values are these things, and she defined them, she said, honey, that's why we've hired you, is to go back to your house tonight and figure that out. So basically, thanks for belly aching, but we need you to go make a plan. But I know that sounds crazy, but that's great leadership. Great leadership from them is pulling me to a place to say, you're right, Jesus does care about this. You guys care about this. This is in our mission and vision and values. And you're right. You've hired me to be the CEO. I'm going to go. Yeah. We're going to go back to the drawing board. Now, I also love that they're like, yes, we'll pray for you. Right. And I joked and I said, and if I can't come up with a good solution, you need to find another CEO. And they were like, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, that's what it means. And so
that's the importance of it.
And so that's where I think that sometimes those mission, vision, values, the destination of where you're going, I think that can be the common link. Because they're not CEOs. They weren't trying to solve the same problems that I'm solving, but we had a common language in place that we could pull on to where we're going.
And I think the mission, vision, and values can be so businessy, and everybody's got to have one. If you're going to have a business, you got to have an LLC or corporation, and then you got to do this, and then you got to have your mission, vision, and values. So almost like a necessity, maybe sometimes. And I do love that when it's that concrete and that this is why we formed. Yes, was for this mission, vision, and value that we have. That changes the why behind what we're doing versus. Let's tack this on because it feels good, right? And it looks good. So
I've described them before as they have mission and vision and values, but they mean it.
That's what it sounds like.
They're living it.
Yeah. And so, that's awesome. Yeah. So, we've kind of talked through one question and just gone through so much, which I love. But I want to move to some others. And one is, can you share some specific ways that you embody leadership, and then maybe what does that mean for daily habits that you have as you're a leader?
I think in my current role, the thing that I know is you're going nowhere without your team. I just don't run an organization that I can run. I have to have really, really, really good teammates, and we have to. Again, we've got to know where we're going. But I would say for me, the thing that I value the most, and I think this is true, even when I was younger, before I was in these type of leadership roles, I just believe in building relationships with people. And so the most important thing when I leave and finish your podcast today, what I'm doing is about every 6 weeks from 3 to 5, my executive team meets, and we meet at a place, and I buy the food, and we just fellowship for a couple of hours. And I say that because this idea of building a team is probably the place where I play the best, is making those relationships and building a team around you that's not a fake team, that you've got team members and you're building into them. I also think every team is unique. And so we had a retreat of a new set of leaders in the Lubbock adult market, part of what I do. And we had a retreat at my house a couple weeks ago. And like one of the things that we did, and it doesn't matter which, thing that you use, we used DISC and Enneagram were our two things, and everybody took it, and we got a big piece of paper and we wrote up on a board, here's the makeup of this team. And that's really interesting for me because I have several different teams. I've got a children's team that leads the children's hospital. I've got an adult team that leads, kind of the adult things. And the composition of those teams is really, really different. And so understanding the composition of your team, building into those people, but then also understanding what your weaknesses are as a team. So what we did is we all studied, okay, this is on the Enneagram where we all fall. And then we drew big circles around. These are all the places that we don't have any team members, right? That are doing these things. So when we look at the strengths of that person that we don't have on our team, what are those? And are we going to be headlong? So like I'll tell you on the adult team, when we looked at this last time, we had a ton of Enneagram 8s, which means I'm going to get lots of opinions. It's awesome. So it's going to be a room where they're all going to tell me.
We got some drivers.
That's right. They'll tell me what they think. But what was interesting is in a hospital, this can't really be a thing. We only had 2 people on our team. There's probably 10 of us that were taking it that are really data driven. And so like our example from that is everybody's got a lot of opinions, but are we actually making those decisions just because we feel that, our gut says that this is what we should do? Or do we actually have how are we going to make sure that the decisions that we're making are actually, data driven? And so we came up with a gentleman that works in our, organization, and we've invited him to some of the executive team meetings because I've got to have him in the room to help us with the parts of that team that are a little weak. And so I would say this idea of building a team, building relationships, but then understanding your team and understanding where you're strong and where you're weak, and then making sure that you bring some things so that you're not unbalanced in your decision making.
Well, and I think too, like the people who get invited into that because their strengths, what a powerful moment for them too to realize their potential and what they offer and they bring we want you in the room because X, so that
and you're even able to say, there was 2 people in the room that I was like, okay, you 2, I'm circling your names. You guys do have opinions, but you're really quiet. And so in every meeting, we are going to give these 2 a chance to tell us what they think. Like you got to build that into, because they're dominated by all the 8s in the room, that are speaking up. And so I just think that building and understanding of your team, you are going to be more successful as a leader because you have a great team. And making sure that you have people in the right seats, that you have the right composition, and when you're unbalanced, bringing some balance, into that team dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's great to know the strengths, weaknesses, having everybody's seat on the bus where they need to be. But kudos to you to like want to explore your team at that level to get to know the people who you have with you. Because I didn't hear you say like we need to nix the people. We have too many 8s. We need to get rid of some 8s. Like they're still bringing value. It's just maybe we need to use that tool now to help bring out a little bit more in these individuals over here. So one, you're identifying and encouraging strengths that your people have, and you're also identifying areas where we need to add to the team.
Agreed.
So I love that, and I would just say that's a neat thing about leadership that I hope that even I moving forward will pause and just say, what can we use? What tools can we use to assess who's in the room, and then fill the gaps if we need to, but also just engage in community, like get to know each other and become like family. And we haven't used the term culture yet, like we haven't used that word, but yet when you've got the string or the thread, back to your mission, vision, and values, and you're leading at the level you are in the room, you're just creating a deep culture. And people don't want to lead that.
I
Like
agree.
if it's grounded enough, like you probably love where you're at.
Yeah, I do.
Because of culture.
I do. And I love my teams. And, you know, I don't see myself, I get that I'm the CEO, but I am a member of that team in the same way. I've got to facilitate the meetings. Yeah. But I just have such great talent around me, and making sure that you put people in those places where they can really excel in the parts. And some of this, again, part of where I learned some of this is, as it turns out, I joke about it, I was absent in med school the day that they taught hospital finance. I must have been ill that day. But I say that jokingly, but the truth is, I'm never going to be as strong in the financial understanding as someone who has a business background. And so my number one hire has to be to surround myself with the CFO that can speak to me and can stay, you know, that's who's, when I left the office a while ago, the last place that I poked my head in was my CFO's office, because that's my connection. Yeah. And so I think whatever that is for you and whatever leadership thing that you're in, it doesn't mean that I didn't want to grow in my financial understanding, but it also means I'm better make sure that I have an expert as my CFO. Because of my weakness.
Understanding yourself.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a Thompson thing, but I'm kind of hearing a theme too, because even just watching Dusty, it's like he's kind of the same way. Like he's just in the room, you know, with elders and with the staff, and never get that idea that he's like top dog, and you know that. And so I just love the humility in that, but also just the realization that you're a part of it. You know, you're not the leader. I mean, you are. You have to lead to an extent, but also you're a part of the group. You know, you're part of what's making it happen. So.
Well, and you know, the scriptures talk about, you know, this. I mean, the scriptures set up some, you know, I don't know what word to use, but some order for, you know, this is how we run the church, and this is how families are going to function. And this, I mean, like, there's all this stuff. And I feel like a lot of times people will really balk against some of that, you know, we're setting up some structure. But like my favorite, you know, scripture talks about that we all, because people hate that term submission, you know, in the Bible, it's a whole other podcast. But what's truth is, my favorite part is where it says that we all submit to one another out of love for Christ. And the truth is, if I'm not submitting myself to my team, it is not just about them submitting themselves to me. It's about me also submitting myself to them. And I just don't think, and I mean, how do we know that? Because I think the greatest leadership book ever written is the Bible and Jesus. And he didn't lead in, I mean, like, he led in a way that he submitted to the apostles, and he submitted to the Father, and, you know, all of those things. And so I think that idea of like mutual submission and mutual respect and mutual deference to that stuff, I think that's where it's at.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. How about a pivotal moment in your career or life that maybe shaped who you are now, either personally or as a leader? Yeah.
So I've talked a little bit about when I became CEO. Yeah. So I'll turn personal for a second. So Dusty and I got married in, let me think back. Oh my gosh. Don't ask me how old I am in this podcast. We got married in 1995. Is when, actually this spring we will celebrate our 30-year wedding anniversary.
Congrats.
So amazing.
Wow, that's awesome.
So Dusty and I had been friends a ton through college. Didn't start dating actually until Dusty had graduated from college and was going to seminary. And when we started dating, we knew each other well enough. It moved pretty quickly from he is my best friend to I think I'm going to marry, you know, this guy. And probably the greatest blessing of my entire life, he very early on in our relationship told me about his brother. And so he's got a younger brother named Cody. And Cody was 10 years younger than Dusty. And they had a common dad, and Cody lived with their common dad. They were very, very close. We all knew it from college in watching Dusty and Cody's relationship. But Dusty's dad was very sick. And so very early on in my relationship with Dusty, he posed to me, he said, I'm going to end up with my brother. Like, just what's going to happen is I'm going to end up with my brother. My dad is very sick. Cody's mom was also very ill. And long story short is about, Dusty and I, it's like it all runs together. I can't actually remember how many months it was after we got married, but a very, very short time after we got married, we ended up with his brother.
Wow.
And we were exceptionally young, and had ended up, Cody was 14.
Wow.
Had just turned, in fact, the weekend that he came home with us, he had just turned 14. So we celebrated his 14th birthday, and then
Goodness.
he, came home from the hospital to our house. And I mean, I have hilarious stories of how terrible we were at parenting. And so we were not awesome at
but you were great at marriage, right? You had the marriage part figured out.
We had the marriage part down. We've been married at least a year.
Oh, my word.
And so we, we're still brand new married. We're still in grad school and in, things like this. We don't have any money. And then a very sad set of circumstances that led for Cody to be with us. Cody lost both of his parents within the span of about a year. And there was some mental and behavioral health. Here it is again, as part of what happened with that. And I have to tell you, when I interviewed for med school, I remember this very distinctly. This gentleman that I was interviewing with, he said, "Ma'am, what makes you think that you can handle medical school?" And I remember very distinctively, I said, "Sir, I've been raising a teenager for about 2 years. And so, you cannot throw something harder at me than, than understanding, what happened with that." And I say that because there's not anything in my life, that changed that abruptly, and that Dusty and I really had to dig deep to figure out how we were going to become parents and how we were going to take this really precious kid who had just these terrible life circumstances, that surrounded him. I joke about it because, the folly of youth is your arrogance, and how you think. We were doing youth ministry at the time, and this is the part that I should laugh about. And I mean, the number of times that Dusty and I would be like, "Well, if we were their parents," talking about your youth kids.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. And so then we get this teenager.
And you are.
We are. And we actually went to this. We have this infamous day where we went to the parent-teacher conference. And let's just say we were not excellent parents at the beginning. I think he was failing every class and, all the stuff. And God, God bless. He'd had this terrible loss. And, Dusty and I are so young and trying to help him. And I remember we walked back to the car and got in the car, and we were just dead silent. And it's every, place that we had went throughout that day, our heads just got lower and lower. And we got in the car, and Dusty goes, "We are really bad," and we are really, really bad at this. But I say that because we had to grow up really, really fast and make changes. And Cody Thompson is one of my favorite people on the planet. He also has given us more grace than we deserve because of attempting to raise him when we were so young. But I don't know that there's anything else in my life that has changed me and taught me more than getting that kid.
Yeah.
And just in such a vulnerable time in his life, and I was so overmatched that I feel like, I know it's not leadership stuff. I mean, it's not the leadership at the hospital, but man, I think early on I learned how to adapt. I learned how to not feel overwhelmed at just impossible situations because it was overwhelming trying to figure out what to do with a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Especially one that had such tragedy. And so I look back at what are moments in my life that really formed me. And I tell him this all the time. There's not anything in my life that has formed me more than when I had the privilege to live with Cody Thompson for a few years and be involved in his story.
Wow.
So,
I mean, it's neat that you call it a privilege.
Yeah,
I mean, knowing that the trials that I'm sure on a daily basis that you guys were facing and still knowing the goodness that came out of that. Yeah. And then you mentioned it earlier, but talking about growth through the trial, I don't remember even how it was worded, but being uncomfortable is where growth comes into play.
Yes.
And you being thrown into kind of the CEO role, at Covenant when you felt like, this is crazy idea. And then you getting thrown into the parenting role right after marriage. I mean, it's just as like unfathomable, and yet it does not surprise me that those are key moments in your journey where it's like, well, those are catapult moments, right? So it's kind of like a, I think you can watch any kind of graph, where it looks like it's moving up in a straight line, but if you zoom in, a lot of times, there's the up and downs, right? That's right. And I just feel like sometimes you probably had those, like, there are peaks where it just like shot up a little bit, but it still kept, the ups and downs along the way.
We had a lot of wisdom for the age that we were, only because, but I joke about that one was almost entirely because we did it so poorly that I think we would be like, okay, that didn't work out so great. Like, what are we going to do next time?
Well, you guys get to laugh about it now. Yeah, everybody's on the laughing side of it, so that's good. All right, so what are you learning right now? I want to hear, like, what is Amy Thompson experiencing that's, is maybe a new direction or just something that's been on your mind lately?
This latest gig that I've taken with Covenant, I'm a pediatrician, and so at least the thing I had in the children's hospital is that I understood the world. As a hospitalist, I worked in that hospital, and I remember when I took over, some wise words that someone said to me is they said, Amy, you understand the hospital. I admit patients from the ED. I would put them on the floor. We also worked in the PICU. I sent patients to the OR. You actually worked in this space and understood it. And I'm now over, depending on how you count, 4 to 5 entities that are all part of Covenant and or Grace in Lubbock. And I was pretty intimidated. About 2 years ago, I was asked to take this service area role over multiple hospitals. And it was another big step out of my, comfort zone and stepping into this world that you don't understand. And I've had to go back to, because then at the Children's Hospital, then I was, 9 years in. And so I was really comfortable with understanding the hospital, understanding the problems, understanding some of those solutions. And then it's not only that I'm having to learn, like a world that I didn't know, adult medicine, but also just like the contexts of those are very different. And that's more of a medical, there's just some different context in a children's hospital versus an adult hospital. Even in how we take patients from the region, and it's just my point is it just could not be different.
Stark
again.
contrast.
And I'm gonna use it again. You can call it ethos, you can call it the offense we're running. The offenses are just completely different. And then we have also been in the midst of Covenant and Grace are partners and part of the same organization. But some changes that we've made in that, and having to learn some of that Grace, business and things as well. And I think the thing right now that is probably pushing me more than anything else is learning that I have to adapt in every room I'm in to what that particular organization needs. And that sounds, but like I have to literally be like, okay, this is my adult hat. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I'm going into, and this is my adult team. And this is what we're trying to do. And then it may be that, throughout the course of a day, I have to switch back and forth between, okay, this is my children's team and the decisions we're making on children's. This is my adult team. And so I think that I'm old, I'm getting older. And I think one of the things that, all of these books, even the Enneagram, DISC, choose any of your things. Commonly, what all of them will talk about is if you really want to grow as a leader, you have to learn how to grow in the things that you're not naturally good at for the purposes of that team, and what they need. And so I think learning adaptability as a leader, I think that's, and it's not just adaptability within one organization, but like within multiple organizations, and not taking the shortcut to pretend like you can come in and lead one like you lead the other. That you have to, in your mind, know, okay, I'm walking into children's and this is our offense. and this is what we're doing here, and this is who's part of my team here. And then 2 hours later, I'm walking in here, and that adaptability piece, I think, has pushed me maybe more than anything.
My thought is this is probably not a day-to-day thing. Like, it's not like today I'm in meeting here, and then tomorrow I've got, it's Friday, so I'm going to go work with the children's, and then Monday I'm going to do adults. Like, this is probably, you mentioned hours. Like, you hang up the phone, and then, somebody walks in the room, or you pick up another call, and you're switching. So it's like, it's got to be a quick move, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But there's a teachable spirit about you that I love, and I think about leaders that it's required.
Agreed.
And what a lesson you had when you were thrown into that role way early on, when you walked in a room and said, I don't understand that. Like, repeat it and tell me what that means. I'm sure you probably had to experience that too as you're walking into different rooms now, and like, okay, let me hear you out on what does that mean? Like, what do you mean when you state this, and why that direction, and having to be a student while being the leader, being the person at the front of the room. So
that's right.
I love that adaptability, teachable spirit. Like, you're just an always learner. Yeah,
always learner. And that the Enneagram one, that's the one I'm most familiar with. It talks about, like, as you grow older, you should really learn how to do all 9 things. And to know, like, that wisdom is actually knowing when you're a 2.
Wow.
And knowing when you're a 5.
Okay.
And knowing when you're a 7. And that really complete leadership is you learning how to adapt and to lean into some things, that are maybe not necessarily, the place that you started.
Yeah.
And learning how to lean into that. And I think that that's probably pushed me more as I get older, is like, that you do need to learn how to lean into some of those parts of yourself that are not your natural inclination for the good of your team.
Which means you have to understand that too. Like, you got to know what the other strengths are in order to grow in those strengths.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So how about a book? Is there a book that's really impacted you in your journey?
Yeah.
I'm sure you're a reader.
I am. I saw this question. Now, what's funny is, so first I want to out Dusty. Dusty is like Mr. Reader, but he listens or listens to audiobooks, but does it on like 1.5 speed, and like it gives me a headache. And so, like,
I've tried it.
Oh my gosh,
I'm not. Okay.
Now I will also confess to you, this may be really discouraging to you and all of the people that are listening to this. I just feel like a lot of leadership books are very redundant, and that I joke that they take about 20 chapters to say what they could have said in 3.
Okay.
And so I am a huge fan. So interestingly, for the truth,
let's hear it.
I will only read the synopsis of a book to decide if I'm actually going to read the book.
Okay.
I mean, like, so I want to say, tell me what you're going to tell me, and then I'm going to determine if
we need to go deep into this or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or can I get all the things that I need to get from you just telling me the 5 things you're going to tell me.
Got the Cliff Note version.
The Cliff Notes version. And so, like, he's a 1.5, I'm a Cliff Notes. Like, tell me. But, I look at some things that, when I talk about, like, natural strengths that I don't have. This is an oldie but a goodie, but there's a book, Crucial Conversations. Okay. And man, the reason that I always talk about this book is this was not natural to me. The way that I lead is not, I've been called before Pollyanna. Okay. And, and that people, my children, even one time my son said, getting in trouble from you is like getting in trouble from Pollyanna. And the truth is sometimes I need to be more direct, and I need to be, harder, I need to get to the point more and say, this is what I think. And so I think when I think of Crucial Conversations, that is where that book really, really helped me, was because for me, like, coming in and having hard conversations was a growth thing for me. That's just not the way that I lead. Yeah. But learning that's imperative in what you have to do. So I'm going to give you 3. You're going to love this. So Crucial Conversations is one for me. I talked a ton about team. One of my favorite things, and we do this often with my team, is we review the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And so that book on the 5 dysfunctions of a team is if you're just looking for something, and you don't have to, that's one of the ones that I think all the chapters are good. I have read most of it. I don't know if I'd say all of it, but most of it. But those 5 principles, and like you grading yourself and your team on how you're doing with those things, I think we do that on the regular. Yeah. So when we do retreats, and we do those twice a year with all my teams.
I need to revisit that one. It's somewhere
here on this. Yeah. We completely judge ourselves on like how are we doing, on these dysfunctions. Book I'm reading now is a new edition of an old book. Okay. And I've actually, it was fascinating for me because I cliff noted it a few years ago, and then I'm actually reading it now in this new edition that came out. It's called Leadership on the Line. Okay. And man, I love it. It's but it's also interesting how the same book, maybe this is my 2 cents from this book. It is amazing how the same book can mean such different things to me based on where I was at in my leadership. And so I have this book that I cliff note and, kind of read the highlights, but I can see my notes. I'm a write in the book, kind of girl. And I can see some of the things that I wrote. And it's really interesting because now that I'm rereading it, different things are sticking out to me than stuck out to me years ago when I read the book. But I really like it. And it's talking about healthcare. This has been one of the hardest, the post-COVID era has been one of the hardest times for especially not-for-profit hospital systems across the United States. And trying to lead through the kind of the aftermath of COVID and what happened for hospitals financially. And so where this book is really good is it's really talking about coming into crisis, kind of situations and figuring out how you're going to lead through really, really hard things. And this has been, the last 2 years for me, I think has been the hardest of my leadership life, just because of the pressures that healthcare is facing and, all the financial constraints. And I mean, there's all kinds of things in that. But it's been the hardest for me in these last 2 years. And so really reading something that's talking about, how you get on the line and how you're gonna make decisions in a tough environment. Yeah, has been good.
Yeah, you never have to lead through hard things or have hard conversations or a lot of hard questions. That's right, man. Well, a couple of things you said in there. I think it's a relief to hear somebody say you don't need to read an entire book to get a lesson out of it. Because I'm the same way. Early on, I had a conversation with somebody too that was like, you don't have to finish every book and read the good ones twice. Yes. Or more than once. And I like that because even for that instance of it's just like the Bible. Every time you pick it up, you're probably going to have something else kind of speaking at you. And the seasons in life that you're in, and it's neat when you are a note taker. Yeah. One thing that I want to pick back up is a 5-year journal. And I actually had started this and then I fell off of it. And my wife were talking about it this weekend. And I want to pick that back up again too, because even to be able to track like what's going on in your life and what are you learning and what it kind of the same principles of like what are the different seasons of life teaching me. That's right. So that is so good. Yeah. Well, I think I could ask you 20 more questions at least. But for the sake of your time, I want to go ahead and wrap us up. But I want to wrap up with one question that I love. If you could define leadership in one sentence, what does that mean to you?
Find some destination that's worthy of your journey and then take people there.
I love that. So find a destination that's worthy of your time. Yeah. And don't go at it alone.
That's right. Take other people with you.
I love that. Yeah. Well, I could hear it in your voice. You're a team player. As you're talking about it, it's community driven. It's service driven. I love that your intentionality around people's strengths, helping them in their weakness, identifying your strengths, working through your weaknesses. You could just tell you're a growing leader. You listen, you observe, and you use that information to grow yourself and others, and I love that. So thank you so much for having me. Yeah, showing us what that looks like, and thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right.